Hi dears, this is a new and fresh story of the haunted mountains known as Appalachian. Support me for more stories like this and leave a comment.
The Appalachian Mountains were a place of beauty and legend, their peaks veiled in mist and mystery. Stories about them had circulated for centuries, tales of strange happenings and places best left alone. One such place was known as Mourning Hollow. Locals spoke of it in whispers, warning hikers to steer clear. But for Lena and her brother Jake, it was just another adventure. They had been hiking together for years, exploring the wild corners of the country. When Jake stumbled upon mention of an unmarked trail online, he couldn't resist. "It's not on any official maps," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. "This is exactly the kind of trip we're looking for." Lena hesitated. There was something unsettling about the descriptions, the vague warnings in the forum posts. But Jake's enthusiasm was contagious, and by the time they reached the unmarked trailhead, she'd convinced herself it was all just local superstition. The trail was narrow and overgrown, snaking through dense forest that seemed to grow darker with each step. Sunlight barely pierced the canopy, and the air was thick and still. There were no birds, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive silence that pressed down on them. Lena felt it almost immediately, a weight in her chest, a sensation of being watched. "Jake," she said, stopping to catch her breath, "doesn't it feel off?" Jake laughed it off, adjusting his pack. "It's just the wilderness. You're overthinking it." By midday, the forest had closed in around them, the trail fading into little more than a faint indentation in the underbrush. That's when they saw it. A small, decrepit cabin in a clearing. Its wooden walls leaned at odd angles, and its roof sagged as if crushed under the weight of time. "Creepy," Lena muttered, but Jake was already walking toward it, curiosity pulling him forward. "It's abandoned," he said, stepping onto the rickety porch. "What's the harm in looking around?" Lena followed reluctantly, her unease growing with each step. Inside, the air was damp and musty, heavy with the scent of decay. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, their jagged lines etched deep into the wood. "What do you think this is?" Lena asked, running her fingers over one of the markings. Jake shrugged. "Old graffiti? Maybe someone squatted here a long time ago." But Lena couldn't shake the feeling that the symbols weren't random. They felt deliberate, as if they were meant to mean something. That night, they camped near the cabin. Jake built a fire, its light flickering weakly against the surrounding darkness. The silence returned, deeper now, more unsettling. Then came the whispers. Faint at first, barely audible, they rose and fell like a distant conversation carried on the wind. Lena froze, her heart pounding in her chest. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Jake's face was pale in the firelight. "It's nothing," he said, though his voice betrayed him. The whispers grew louder, circling their camp. They weren't random sounds. Lena could almost make out words, strange and guttural. The forest seemed alive, shifting and pulsing around them. Shadows moved at the edge of the firelight, quick and darting, always just out of sight. "We need to leave," Lena said, gripping Jake's arm. But where would they go? The next morning, the trail was gone. No matter which direction they walked, they ended up back at the cabin. Jake's confidence began to crack. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, staring at the leaning structure as if it held the answers. The forest was no longer just silent. It was oppressive, a living thing that seemed to conspire against them. The whispers never stopped, growing bolder as the day wore on. By nightfall, they were trapped. The cabin seemed to beckon them, its door creaking open on its own. Reluctantly, they stepped inside, the walls glowing faintly with those strange symbols. The air buzzed with an electric tension. the whispers now a deafening chant. The floor beneath them groaned, and the cymbals began to pulse with an eerie light. Then the floorboards split open, revealing a void of impenetrable darkness. From the void came hands, skeletal and clawed, reaching for them. Lena screamed, her voice lost in the cacophony. Jake grabbed her, pulling her back as the hands clawed at her legs. "We have to get out of here," he shouted, his voice barely audible over the rising din. They ran, bursting out of the cabin and into the night. The forest was alive with movement, the shadows coalescing into figures with glowing, hollow eyes. They gave chase, their unnatural movements closing the distance far too quickly. Lena and Jake ran blindly, crashing through the underbrush, their lungs burning. Somehow they stumbled out of the forest and onto an open trail. The figures stopped at the edge of the trees, their eyes burning like embers as they watched the siblings flee into the dawn. Lena and Jake never spoke of what happened. They avoided the Appalachians altogether after that, their love for hiking overshadowed by what they'd seen. But Lena couldn't bring herself to delete the photos she'd taken. The cabin, the symbols, the faint figures lurking in the shadows, proof of a place that shouldn't exist, a trail that no map dared mark.